West Tigers podcast, right? Well, not smack bang, because we are now in the second half of summer, and it's really feeling it in Sydney. It's been a muggy and hot few days, and that means that as we get towards February, I know that when the Australian Open comes to an end, not that I'm a massive tennis watcher, but I know that when the Australian Open's over, it's time to start getting excited because the trials aren't too far away. And there's been some West Tigers news that maybe we were sort of anticipating for a little while. And of course, that's around David Nofoaluma, the West Tigers' longest serving player, now no longer with the club. We thought we'd do a little special edition of the West Tigers podcast to discuss. And we've got Declan McCutcheon and the return of Gary Watson. And I don't know if Gary heard the slight little grilling he received.
How's my hair looking, Declan? Do my plugs look all right?
Yes, Gary, I'm really sorry to say it doesn't look like the plugs took, so I think you wasted your money.
The trip to Thailand was all for nothing, Gary. Let's have a talk about David Nofoaluma. Are we surprised that we've ended up here? I sort of foreshadowed that this was something that's sort of been in the works for a while. We loaned him out to Melbourne. There's been different rumours about different things. And then, of course, that's increased over the last few months. Declan, when you read the news that we'd served that termination letter and it looked like the end for Nofa was near, were you surprised by that? Did you have any mixed feelings about it?
Yeah, not really. I wasn't really surprised. I think we saw before Christmas when it was reported that Nofoaluma went to the RLPA to complain about the training. Usually, like when you go to like a players' association or like some sort of union, it usually means that the relationship between employer and employee isn't the best. And I just think like Benji Marshall coming in, he's trying to like set standards. Clearly, Nofoaluma wasn't meeting those standards, and it's even more surprising because they would have played a lot of footy together, so they would have had you'd assume they would have had like a pretty good relationship before that. So I think it just kind of shows you just like how extreme this was, and like Benji's trying to make standards happen at the club, which is great to see. But then, yeah, I think after that, it was only a matter of time until like something like this was going to happen. So I wasn't really too surprised. There are some mixed emotions because I think we can all agree that it hasn't really worked for him here for a number of years now, and he was on a fair wicket in terms of his contract. So I think from that perspective, I think it makes sense to move him on from the club. But yeah, you can't help but think. I remember like back in 2012 when he was in that under-20s Tyler Cup team. And he was like just one of the best wingers in the competition in that division with Corbetty, and just like a lot of fond memories from then. But yeah, I think it had to happen, unfortunately.
192 games, Gary, and of course losing Luke Brooks in the same off-season, regardless of what you think of them as players or what their contribution has been or could be into the future. It's a big change for a club, isn't it? There's two people that have been at the club and in the colours for a long time. So it's going to be, again, another new look West Tigers team. It's going to be a little bit hard to adjust to not seeing Nofoaluma and Brooks out there in 2024, which is kind of exciting too, because we do have obviously after all this time following those players, we have a good understanding of who they are, but it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for us to not have those guys there.
Yeah, for me, it's really the departure of the two players who have been here for consistently in that 12 years of failure. They're the two longest serving players, and we're looking at a clean slate off the field, and I think it starts to give us a little bit of a clean slate on the field as well. The baggage of that 12 years of failure for me, with both Brooks and Nofoaluma now leaving the club, I think that really draws a line in the sand. And a lot of the issues with scar tissue that we've spoken about on this pod in the past, I think that kind of ends that because it's a fairly new roster now. I think it's Alex Twal is now the longest serving player at the club. The one part I did find surprising about it, though, it wasn't so much that he was moved on. I think that's been coming for a while. I think it's probably been actually coming for a couple of years. I think the loan to Melbourne was an attempt to kind of find him a new home. What does surprise me about this is in the manner that it happened. I wouldn't have been surprised to hear that we'd released him and he was going to the Super League, or that we released him and he possibly going to another NRL club, even though I feel that's unlikely. the surprising part is the way it came about with the termination papers. I can't remember the last time. I don't know if can ever recall a player being let go in this manner, and that's the disappointing part for me. That our greatest try scorer, our first player to score 100 tries for the club, has gone out of our club in this fashion is disappointing for me. Though I think it's the right decision, just how it happened, and I'm not blaming the club for this. I think David has to take a fair bit of the responsibility, but it's just a disappointing end to a guy who spent so much time at our club, who when we had the three guys leave, the Tedescos, the Moses, and the Woods all leave, they quickly announced the signing of a guy like Nofaluma to show that there was loyalty in our club, and then to see it kind of end in this way is disappointing, but more so disappointing for him. And I hope that he's handling that well, because it's a big thing that has happened over the last couple of days in his life.
Declan, you made the very good point that Benji played alongside him for a long time. He would know him very, very well. I posted that on the West Tigers podcast forum, that just that if you've played with someone, you get that different perspective actually being on the field with them. But he was told by Benji that he wouldn't be playing first grade. That seems to, if that report is true, that may be at the crux of what the matter is, and why Nofaluma at least contributed to where we've ended up. Do you think that it's a good idea, or it's the first sort of major play that Benji Marshall has made, aside from signing the Jerome Luai for next year? But in terms of the 2024 season, he's faced a big test. He's got a player that he clearly didn't want to select and didn't see as part of his team, and he's ended up making the big call. We could have stuck by Nofaluma in his contract potentially for 2 years, but I think it's a sign that Benji's, putting my optimist hat on, of course, but that he's making this team his own.
Yeah, I think that, no matter how you look at it, I think the club has wanted to get rid of Nofaluma for a while. So I'm not sure that it's completely down to the fact that, the training. I think there was a whole lot of background that, some of it we're privy to, some of it we're not. So I think Nofaluma has been offside of the club probably since before Benji Marshall was even announced as head coach. But I do think it's a good point you raised, because, usually, a coach, when they retire, there's a little bit of time that elapses before they become a head coach. And by the time that happens, most of the players they played with, or all of the players they played with, are gone. But with Benji Marshall's case, that's not true. But there's a few people that he has in fact played with obviously Nofaluma, Alex Twell, Alex Seyfarth. So there's all these guys, and I think it's a good indication to see that he's not actually playing favourites with any of these guys. He's drew standards, and he's going to enforce them, which I think is really vital for especially the younger players in the team, because obviously guys like Coruscant, they're winners, they know what it looks like to succeed. But when you bring a young player in, you need to show them immediately what it is to be a first grade player, how you train, how you prepare, how you eat, how you play game day, how you warm up, stuff like that. So just for Benji Marshall to kind of take that hardline stance on it, I think it's really good to see. And I think as well, based on all the articles we've read as well, I think it seems that the Tigers have looked out for Nofaluma's welfare a little bit in this situation, because I heard some reports from Michael Chamis saying that it could be argued that the Tigers did have enough grounds to just dismiss him without the payout, but they wanted to give him the money so they could at least not leave him hanging, so he had something. And they also sent people, players and staff, to check on his welfare. And I just think that that's really important in today's mental health awareness, to do stuff like that. And I think that although we bag out clubs like the Roosters for their salary cap stuff, I think clubs like that are really good at taking care of their players. And yes, it's ended pretty badly, but I think for the club to do that, I think it just shows that, I think players look at that sort of stuff, and it becomes, I think they get credit for it in terms of how they're viewed by outside players. Because if you look at a team like the Dragons, for example, how Ronald Volkman does his shoulder and then they can just leave him out to dry. I think players look at that. Player managers and outside people look at that sort of stuff. So I'm just happy I heard that the Tigers were genuinely interested in his welfare. And he's not, a player that, we're going to pick in first grade, but to still care about him, I think it says a lot about Benji Marshall as a coach and as a person.
Yeah, that's some good points, Declan, absolutely. Having a look at some of these stats, so his player number was 164. The next debutant that we have will be 276. So that's 111 debutants that Noff has seen in his time here, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. 192 games. And as you said, Gary, the most senior Tiger now, Alex Twal, who debuted in 2017. And then you've got to get to 2020, where it was Dewey, Kapoa and Seyfarth, all those 2020 debutants. So as Declan said, not too many guys that have played alongside Benji Marshall in the team in 2024. Gary, the $300,000 buyout of the contract, 2-year contract, it sounds like a pretty good deal for us. And, I mean, it's obviously all dependent on what happens to David Nofoaluma in regards to getting another contract. But I think that where we're at, that's a pretty good deal for both parties, I would think.
This is a lot better deal than I thought would be walking out of the David Nofoaluma situation with. It's fairly common knowledge that his last contract was up by our previous chairman to get it to the point where it was, that most people thought was a pretty poor contract, a long-term contract at $525,000 a year for a winger. And to walk away from that with 2 years to go on the contract and us only having to fork out $300,000, I think is very good business. And especially if, as Declan said, the club has given that $300 to ensure that David has some money coming in. I'm quite happy with that because I didn't think we'd be getting out of this situation anywhere near that. He had over $1 million sitting on the table for the next 2 years. And not only the money it frees up, it doesn't free up a lot of money this year because that $300,000 will be added to what he's also already earned this year, which was probably around $100,000 to $150,000 as well. So it will free up about $100,000 for this year, but next year it frees up that whole contract. And the other really strong thing is for us is it frees up that extra roster spot. And I think that's really important to allow us to make some more moves in the market. So I think a very good deal for the West Tigers. Not such a good deal for David, even if the club is looking out for him, to go from having $1 million sitting on the table to walking away with $300,000. Must be a tough spot for him to be in. So hopefully he can pick up another club somewhere. I'd love to see him pick up another club. I don't think it will be in the NRL. I don't think there'll be too many clubs lining up to sign him. But hopefully he can pick up a spot in England and it doesn't affect him too harshly financially. Because despite me thinking that we needed to move on from him, I don't want to see it ruin his life either. And the situation he's in now, if he doesn't pick up another job, it has quite large consequences on his future moving forward. So hopefully he can pick up another club somewhere.
And to be fair, I mean, he wasn't woefully out of form. He's not someone that's lost his ability. He's maybe not as fast as what he was, but in terms of the Super League, I think he'd do really well over there.
And he actually showed some good form last season, I thought. That period after he'd been dropped down to reserve grade and he came back quite strong. And I thought for a couple of games there, for about a month, he was one of our better players. And that's what's disappointing for me, because you could see that sort of form from him in spurts still. But for some reason, whether it was attitude, whether it was unable to maintain that form for other reasons, he couldn't keep that form up for more than a couple of weeks at a time.
Okay, we're going to talk about what to do with that 30th position shortly, but I thought we might have a look at what our stocks are in terms of wingers. So I've written down here, Declan, Alex Lobb, who apparently is training very well, big, tall, lanky kind of winger from the Dragons. Junior Tupu, of course, still in the mix for 2024. Charlie Staines. And then you've got this Solomon Alamolo from Rugby, which had plenty of big raps and some real highlights on him, apparently training well as well. And then you've got some guys you might describe as sort of options, but less probably first choices for the wing, Naden, Toa and Kapoa. So there's a bit of depth there and a few options for the coach.
Yeah, probably not a lot of established quality that you could bet on. But yeah, I think that I'll probably go Staines and Tupou to start the year. I think the guy from Rugby, I've seen a few of his games in Rugby, but I think you'd imagine there would be a few games where he just needs a transition in New South Wales Cup, and then maybe it might be like Jurien Bula, where he started the year really well in Cup, and then he found himself in first grade halfway through the season and kept his spot. But yeah, I think that there are some pretty good options in the wing. Probably not excellent. I'm a little bit worried about how we're going to start our sets this year. But in terms of like depth, we do have some. But I would like us to see. I would like to see us sign someone maybe with that freed up roster spot now that Noffa's gone.
Gary, starting off the set, look, Noffa, it was probably one of his strong parts of his game for a long time, was those power runs. Maybe not as effective in the last couple of years as what he once was. But not being selected for first grade, probably not overly surprised given the nuggety kind of winger. It's not really part of the NRL so much in today's game. It's more sort of the lanky guys that can out-jump their opposition. If you look at the Xavier Coates, for example, that type of body.
Well, and I think with the rule changes to the short dropouts, that's actually going to increase. I think sides are going to be looking for those taller wingers to help counter the increase in short dropouts I'm expecting to see. And that's kind of another nail in the coffin of David Nofoaluma. He was very good at getting those sets started, and that was the best aspect of his game, when he'd put his head down and go forward. There was a few too many mistakes around trying to pass, trying to get a quick play the ball after some of those runs that were quite damaging at times in close games over the years. But I don't think anyone can really fault when he did put his head down and he really did go forward. He was great at starting our sets. I agree with Declan. I think we're looking at Staines and Tupu as our wingers for the start of the season. I think we'll see them for the majority of the season in those roles. I think they would have been the starting wingers whether David was here or not. By the sounds of it, Benji Marshall agreed with that, and that's probably why that comment was made. With the addition of Olam, it does give us a couple of extra options as well, because I think we were looking at Naden and probably Toa as our centres. Now, both Naden and Toa could fill in at a wing spot as well. So there are other options in those roles as well, depending on how we go in the centres. So there are a few options. I don't think I'd be rushing out looking for just to sign any winger at the moment, because I do think there are a few options there and we can make some changes. And I'd prefer to wait a little bit and kind of see where the weaknesses kind of show up in the first month of football, of where we might need to add a little bit. So I'd be hanging on to that spot for the moment. But yeah, I expect to see Staines and Tupu, which I already did, in those wing spots come round one.
Declan, the strategy in recent times, so getting onto that 30th spot, the strategy seems to be to sort of take the hit a little bit and promote some younger guys. If you look at our teams page on the West Tigers website, and there's a lot of guys there that haven't played first grade that are in that 30. It's a luxury to have that 30th spot open. We don't know what they're going to contribute, but do you foresee us maybe adding another young player in, or are you with Gary, sort of hold on to that 30th spot and wait and see what happens?
Yeah, I would like to hold on to that spot and see what happens. Just see who to start the year off in another club playing reserve grade, someone who might not be in form, to see who's available on the open market, because the difference this year is development players can play from round one. So like before they had to wait till I think it was round 13, which kind of like handicap round 11. Yeah. Thank you, Gary. So that restriction no longer there anymore. So they can play as development players from round one. So it doesn't really limit us as to who we can pick. I think training trialists still need to wait till round 11. But yeah, and as you said before, the roster's already so young. I wouldn't be rushing to add another young player coming through the grades. I think I would try and get maybe someone who's looking at like cracking the first grade this year. But it's depending on obviously how much quality there is available on the market. But then obviously if we can't find anything, which in recent years we haven't, just upgrade someone and don't waste the money if we can't find anyone good.
So, I mean, it's a pretty good place to be in. That realistically, if you think about, injuries, I'm touching wood, injuries permitting, at this stage you couldn't imagine us buying any spine players touching wood very solidly, in the next 3 or 4 months. You couldn't really imagine us buying back rowers given the stock. So, maybe a prop or maybe a winger. That might be what we're sort of thinking. Maybe, Gary, they seem to be maybe the two areas of the squad where maybe you could see a bit of a injection at some stage.
Look, for me, the areas that we do need to upgrade moving forward, be that now or going into 2025, I'm still looking for that high impact prop we've been talking about. If a guy comes along who fits that role and can make that role his own at our club, I think we need to be looking at it. I really do believe that we need a ball playing lock forward. We don't have that at all at the moment. Pole's done a great job playing that lock role, but he plays it as a third prop. And I think we really need a guy who can bite into the line, who can run the ball, but can then also play out the back to our halves. I think that's been missing a little bit in our side. And anywhere in those centres or wingers, I think we still need upgrading. Those outside backs were not strong enough. So I think those 3 key areas are what we need to be looking at, not just now to fill our 30-man roster, but over the next 12 months moving into 2025.
Yeah, I think it's a really delicate situation at the moment because we went down the development pathway and those players are like on the precipice of being ready for first grade. So you have to make really careful and calculated decisions about who you sign, who's already played first grades, because then you might unintentionally block someone. So for example, that impact prop, I think Hammond Uele, I think the Warriors, there was some like ridiculous sum like $700K that they're looking to sign him for a year. And that's a lot of money. Or like, do we go in looking for someone like that to be that impact prop, or do we give someone like Jordan Miller an opportunity who's come through the grades and who's a really good player if he gets his conditioning right, and then you buy that, you buy that 13, that ball playing lock, or do you give someone like Chris Bogodu or Ketlo Lily an opportunity, knowing that yes, they might not be ready to 100% ready to go to win first games right now, but you're going to set yourself up in the long run, and plus you're going to get them on a much more team-friendly contract. But in saying that, though, I don't think there's really like an obvious choice at the moment for the outside backs to come in that kind of situation. So that's where I would be looking to spend my money on that top 30 spot.
Well, I think that's one of the crucial things that that Benji Marshall, especially, that the club needs to work out this year is which of the juniors are going to be ready to step up in the next 12 months into one of those starting roles. Whether it's Jordan Miller, I don't care if that impact prop comes from within. That's great. It saves us money. It's the best outcome possible. But it is the area we need to upgrade. So that decision needs to be made, and it needs to be made soon. That those guys are really, and I know we've got them on top 30 contracts now, but they were part of the junior deals that they signed. The reason we have so many young guys moving into that top 30 this year is that we signed a lot of those young guys a couple of years ago or last year on contracts that guaranteed top 30 spots in future years. And what we need now is hopefully those decisions that were made in the last 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, hopefully those decisions were the right ones and we picked the right guys to have going into our top 30 this year and a number of them going into our top 30 next year. Hopefully those decisions are right and the likes of Jordan Miller comes through and he can make that impact prop his own. That a 13 comes through and they make that their own. That's really crucial over the next 12 months. And I think that's the big thing to look at this year. I think as supporters and as the club, that's one area I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I'm going to try and get out to more junior games and more reserve grade games this year to really see where those players are coming through and hopefully we get that sorted out. We've spoken about the last couple of years how we needed to sort out our halves. That started to happen. We've got Luai coming next year who's going to make a massive difference. We still have to make a decision about who's going to be partnering him moving forward. So that's another area of interest for this year. But those young guys coming through, which guys are going to really come into that top 30 and not just be top 30 players, but be genuine NRL players for 50, 100, 150 games. They're the crucial decisions for Benji Marshall really to make this season.
The future's looking pretty bright when you think about some of the talent that doesn't look to be too far off. You know, Miller looks like a big unit, and I've got high hopes for him. I really liked what I saw of Leilili last year, and Fagatu seems like a talent, and of course Galvin. So it very much keeps me interested is watching the young guys come through and seeing them become NRL players. And look, they might not all make it, and there's plenty of other names you could mention there, but it's exciting to see what we're going to get. And even if a few of them make it, we're in a pretty good place, I think. There was a discussion on the West Tigers podcast forum about it being the best off-season ever. Do you guys ever pinch yourself and think, my goodness, we've come a long way? When you think about, even if you went back and listened to episode number, say, 285 of the West Tigers podcast, which is not that far away.
I don't think you have to go back that far. I don't think you have to go back that far, Joel. It's really since December. Like, the changes have been coming really, really quick.
Well, to be fair, there would have been more episodes of the podcast if Eddie hadn't have self-excluded himself from from the podcast.
Where is he? Again, not here.
Once again, cricket takes priority. He needs to get his priorities straight. But it's been pretty incredible when you think about it. And sometimes it reminds me of the quote. You know, when one person dies, it's a tragedy. When 1,000 people die, it's a statistic. It's kind of like that. Like, we've had so much change that you have to sort of pinch yourself sometimes and think, you know, where we were a few months ago and the amount of change and the amount of upheaval and management change. It's been pretty remarkable. Is it the best off-season ever? Gary, you've been here since day one. Are you, in terms of the amount of change in the club, the amount of optimism that's come in, cautious optimism is the word, but I've never known an off-season like this.
Yeah, I don't like to judge the off-season until we get to at least round 5, when we can kind of see what's happening. But for the future of our club, I think the changes that have happened in this off-season, I don't think there's ever been bigger change and bigger momentum and a bigger sense of we're finally going in the right direction than what I've seen this off-season. I think you have to go back to the off-season of leading into 2000 to see this amount of change, and that was the setup of a new club. It's almost like we're going into this season. I'm sure a lot of West Tigers fans feel the same way. It's almost like we're going into this season with a new club. There's been that much change at our club. We've got a new coach, we've got a new CEO, we've got a new chairman, we've got a new board coming. Like, that is a completely different club. And we've had that huge turnover of our longest serving players. So this really is a fresh start for the club, and hopefully they can make the most of it, especially over the next 2 years. But hopefully they can make the most of it this year, and we'll have a nice, happy Steve because we make the top 8. I don't want to deal with Steve if we don't make the top 8 this year.
And Gary, I'm going to get a little bit of revenge for you on Declan. So, Declan, what about for you? You've been a West Tigers fan for 2 or 3 years. Was this the best off-season you've ever?
It's been a long 2 or 3 years, I tell you. But yeah, I think that in my 2 or 3 years, it would have to be up there in terms of off seasons. As Gary said, I can't really think of a time where like so many West Tigers fans have a positive and upbeat attitude, because I wasn't really like on the socials back when we had that good form in 2010 and 2011. I'm not even sure if the forum was a thing in 2005. I could be wrong, or like the socials. Or it may have been flip phones. I need to ask Gary, because, you know, he would remember back then. But
mate, there were still forums. It was forums were the king back then.
Gary was making friends way back then on internet forums.
Yeah, I was actually. We spoke about the club with smoke signals.
Exactly. More homing pigeons.
Mm. Yeah, but yeah, I can't think of a more exciting off season just in terms of like the pure potential. And even if we did miss out on Luai, I think the fact that we made such systematic changes at the board level, I think that was enough for me to be really optimistic, and that the big signing would eventually come. So when they actually did manage to announce Luai, it was just the cream on top of the cake. So yeah, lots to be excited for, even though I think this season might be one of transition, even though Steve doesn't want to hear it.
It's really nice, though, to see that unified fan base. The amount of infighting amongst our fan base over the last couple of years, and the kind of almost depression that our fan base was under. It's so nice to see that lifted, and it's not because we started winning games. It's because people can see that the future is hopefully going to be better, and that word hope, I don't think it's something our club's had for a long time, and I guess that kind of relates back to that feeling in 2000 when I think most Balmain fans and most Western Suburbs fans thought that the clubs were going to kind of disappear during that process or be swallowed up by other clubs. And that merger gave them hope. And I think the changes this off-season has done the same thing for our fan base. It's provided hope.
And further to what I said at the end of last episode's pod, I really just want to be able to enjoy the football team again. It's been so long since it's actually given us any sense of enjoyment. It's been so dire for the last few years. Been awful.
Yeah, imagine coming on the pod with a happy Declan.
Oh, mates. Imagine coming on the pod with a happy Steve.
It doesn't matter. Steve's never happy.
Yeah.
Grumpy Steve.
Top 8 or bust. Premiership or bust.
That's it. Anything less, if you're not first, you're last. That's Steve.
Thanks, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, thank you. Hopefully, next edition of the West Tigers podcast, we'll be, obviously, we will be closer to trials, but we might have sort of more team news and some whispers about what might be happening with that first team for the first trial, and it's not too far away now. And, of course, in the meantime, don't forget to join us on the West Tigers podcast forum. It's free to join up, and we're always reading it, and you can contribute to the pod through 2024 through there. Get us on Facebook as well. And thank you, Declan, and thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.